Hello, welcome to World Report. I'm Jash Hirani. As the US-Iran conflict drags West Asia into a prolonged strategic stalemate, a deeper realignment is unfolding beneath the battlefield smoke. Many significant developments unfolded quietly while the Middle East conflict continued to dominate global headlines. The UAE openly signaled that it wanted the war to continue, while Saudi Arabia pushed for de-escalation and restraint. In middle of the crisis, the UAE expelled nearly 15,000 Pakistanis and demanded repayment of its 3.5 billion loan to Islamabad. At the same time, just days before the UAE announced its dramatic exit from OPEC, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval made a high-profile visit to Abu Dhabi. Were these merely isolated developments unfolding during a turbulent war, or were they all connected pieces of much larger geopolitical shift? Why did the UAE harden its position towards Pakistan? Why was Saudi Arabia taking a different line from Abu Dhabi? Why did Ajit Doval's visit take place right before one of the biggest oil decisions in recent Gulf history? What is the emerging India-UAE Defence Partnership Agreement? And what does all of this reveal about the growing rivalry between Saudi Arabia and UAE and the emerging role of India and Pakistan in this new Middle Eastern power struggle? Is there a method behind what appears to be madness? Let's decode these developments in today's episode of World Report. What once appeared to be a unified Gulf front is now exposing sharp fractures, particularly between the UAE and Saudi Arabia, two ambitious Arab powers increasingly pursuing rival visions for the region's future. And standing quietly but decisively behind these competing Gulf camps are two South Asian rivals that have mirrored each other's geopolitical positions since 1947, India and Pakistan. New Delhi has steadily deepened its strategic embrace with Abu Dhabi, aligning itself closer to the Emirati camp as the war reshapes regional power equations. For India, the stakes are clear and pragmatic: energy security, trade corridors, investment flows, and long-term economic leverage. Amid global volatility, India is attempting to turn conflict into an opportunity, pursuing for favorable oil and energy arrangements while strengthening its footprint in the Gulf's emerging order. Pakistan, meanwhile, has remained firmly tethered to Riyadh, leaning on its decade-old dependence on Saudi patronage. As economic pressures mount at home, Islamabad's priorities less about strategic expansion and more about survival, securing financial lifelines, deferred oil payments, and fresh bailout support from the Saudis. The growing UAE-Saudi divergence is no longer just an intra-Gulf rivalry. It is becoming a wider geopolitical chessboard where India and Pakistan are positioning themselves on opposite sides yet again, each trying to extract maximum advantage from an increasingly fractured Middle East. Pakistan celebrated the Saudi-Pakistan Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement, the SDMA, as if it had entered into its own Gulf version of NATO. Islamabad repeatedly highlighted the pact's most dramatic clause: an attack on Saudi Arabia or Pakistan would be treated as an attack on both. Analysts rush to compare it with NATO's famous Article 5 collective defense principle. But geopolitics has a habit of exposing the difference between rhetoric and reality. While tensions between Tehran and Riyadh escalated and Iranian missiles targeted Saudi interests, Pakistan did not rush troops, aircrafts, warships to defend the kingdom. Instead, Islamabad positioned itself as a mediator between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The attack on one is an attack on both slogans suddenly looked far more symbolic than operational. That episode raised serious questions in New Delhi. India had a huge question mark on the Saudis regarding their defense pact with Pakistan. Saudis, however, clarified that its relationship with India is independent and this defense agreement with Pakistan has nothing to do with India. So when Riyadh signed a strategic defense pact with Pakistan, Indian policymakers naturally wondered, if another India-Pakistan conflict erupts, where would Saudi Arabia stand? Riyadh moved quickly to calm those fears. The Saudis made it clear that their ties with India are independent of their military understanding with Pakistan, and the ties between the two remain robust. Riyadh perhaps remembered that India is one of its biggest oil buyers. India thought that if Pakistan is increasingly becoming a key player in the Gulf, then where are we? Thus, New Delhi is also set to deepen ties with UAE through a strategic defense cooperation pact, with leaders of both nations expected to meet on May 18 during PM Modi's stopover in Abu Dhabi en route to Netherlands. The groundwork for the agreement was laid on Jan 19 when UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed visited India with a high-level delegation, and both sides signed a letter of intent on defense cooperation. The partnership is expected to focus on defense manufacturing, military innovation, special operations, interoperability, cyberspace, and counterterrorism. And as Pakistan appears to be gravitating towards the Saudi camp, India too has begun signaling stronger political alignment with the UAE, including backing Abu Dhabi's position over Iranian strikes on the Emirati territory. As India-UAE partnership deepens, strains began surfacing in Pakistan's ties with Abu Dhabi. Saudi Arabia's growing alignment with Pakistan also failed to sit well with the UAE. Amid the ongoing crisis, the Emiratis even demanded the return of the 3.5 billion loan extended to Pakistan, a debt Islamabad ultimately repaid with Saudi assistance. The UAE didn't stop there. Amid the ongoing conflict, the country reportedly expelled around 15,000 Pakistanis, a significant development considering Pakistan's heavy dependence on remittances from the Gulf region. At the same time, the geopolitics surrounding oil in the Gulf has also intensified as the war involving Iran continues to unfold. While the United States has been countering Iran and attempting to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the UAE made another major move by exiting OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Interestingly, a few crucial developments took place before the Emiratis decided to leave OPEC. On April 26, 2026, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval visited the UAE and met UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed. According to the Indian government, both sides discussed measures to deepen the comprehensive strategic partnership along with regional situation and other issues of mutual interest between the two nations. At the time, the visit did not attract major media attention. However, just 2 days later, on April 28, 2026, the UAE announced its exit from OPEC. To understand the significance of this move, it is important to briefly look at what OPEC actually does. OPEC is an organization in which member states are assigned specific oil production quotas in order to regulate global supply of oil and maintain stable oil prices. The UAE had been allotted a production limit of around 3.4 to 3.5 million barrels per day. However, the Emiratis possessed refining and production capabilities far beyond the quota they were permitted to extract. Being among the countries most affected by the regional instability linked to Iran, the UAE requires substantial financial resources to rebuild and strengthen its economy. Increasing oil production and selling more crude in the open market offered one of the fastest ways to boost revenues. This became one of the key reasons behind UAE's decision to leave OPEC. Several analysts have speculated that there may have been some form of understanding or correspondence between India and the UAE before the latter exited OPEC. Similar speculations had emerged earlier when Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Israel and met the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shortly before the US-Israeli strikes on Iran. Some observers believe India may have explored the possibility of securing oil supplies from the UAE at prices favorable to New Delhi after the Emiratis left OPEC. However, it is important to note that these claims remain speculative and no official confirmation has been provided by either side. Pakistan, acting as a mediator in the US-Iran war, had been showing a relatively meek response to Iran's strike on the UAE. Meanwhile, the UAE favored continuing the war and was also willing to join the conflict in an effort to cripple Iran as much as the US and Israel could. Once regarded as one of the world's financial capitals and a symbol of regional stability, the UAE was struck hard by Iran, shattering the long-held perception that the country was insulated from war and geopolitical instability. Following the attacks, the Emiratis became increasingly determined to weaken Iran and restore the global image of stability and security that the UAE had previously enjoyed. UAE's ambition of becoming a regional power was challenged by Iranian strikes, and Pakistani mediation irked the Emiratis even more. The UAE's rival in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, has been calling for de-escalation and has assured Iran that Saudi airspace will not be used for operations against it. This perhaps explains why the Red Sea route, which Saudi Arabia relies upon to supply oil to the global markets and which could potentially be blocked by the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen, has remained open and largely undisturbed. In contrast, the UAE continues to struggle with securing uninterrupted oil supply routes to the world market. As a result, the strategic outlook and response of the two Gulf nations differ significantly. While Pakistan has been mostly quiet about Iranian strikes on the UAE, India has been highly vocal about it. While UAE and India are seen close in this equation in the Gulf, there is a third member in this alliance playing a significant role, and that's Israel. As India's ties with Israel are exceptional, and even PM Modi in his Israeli Knesset speech had said that India stands with Israel with full conviction in this moment and beyond. The relationship between UAE and Israel is also getting stronger by the day. Reports say that Israel had helped UAE defend from the Iranian strikes by giving them their Iron Dome system. Officials of both the countries confirmed that they were in close military coordination since the war in West Asia began. Not to forget the hexagonal alliance of Israel, where India along with UAE are a part of the intelligence sharing grouping. The grouping was announced in February 2026. The growing rivalry between the two Arab powers now stretches far beyond the Gulf, increasingly shaping conflicts and political alignments across the wider Middle East and also Africa. Although Saudi Arabia and the UAE continue to hedge against one another through strategic partnerships with Asian powers, their competing visions for regional influence have become most visible in flashpoints in Yemen, Sudan, the Horn of Africa, and Syria. For Riyadh, the UAE's expanding footprint in these theaters has become a source of deep unease. Saudi officials are particularly alarmed by Abu Dhabi's role in Yemen, a country that shares a long and vulnerable border with the kingdom, and in Sudan, which sits directly across the Red Sea from Saudi Arabia's western coast, where both the Gulf states have been at odds supporting rival power groups in the two nations. From Riyadh's perspective, instability or worse, state collapse in either country could carry direct consequences for Saudi's national interest. The kingdom is equally wary of the UAE's growing influence in the Horn of Africa and in Syria. Such developments are viewed in Riyadh not merely as political maneuvering, but as potential threats to regional order. Geography only sharpens Saudi's anxieties. Yemen, Sudan, and the Horn of Africa lie far closer to Saudi Arabia than to the UAE, intensifying Riyadh's sense of strategic exposure, affecting its trade route from the Red Sea to Bab al-Mandeb to the Gulf of Aden and beyond. Over the past few years, the two Gulf powers have increasingly found themselves backing opposing camps in these regional conflicts, most notably in the civil wars in Yemen and Sudan. The Saudis are now directing at the UAE of supporting non-state actors, and militias undermine regional stability and weakens state sovereignty. The rhetoric emerging from Saudi Arabia has also grown noticeably sharper. Anti-UAE commentary in Saudi state-linked media and among influential voices has intensified, reflecting a broader shift in Riyadh's posture. The underlying message from the kingdom is unmistakable. Saudi Arabia sees itself as the natural leader of the Arab and Muslim worlds and expect regional actors to align with that hierarchy. This sentiment was captured bluntly by prominent Saudi commentator Ali Shahihabi, who wrote on X, "There is a recurring phenomena in the Gulf Arab states that stems from a structural imbalance between one very large state, Saudi Arabia, and a number of much smaller ones. As these smaller states acquire great wealth, they often begin to operate under the illusion that they are equal partners of the kingdom rather than the beneficiaries of a system ultimately stabilized by it. To assert their individualism, they periodically adopt contrarian political positions to signal independence. The UAE, however, sees itself through an entirely different lens. Abu Dhabi views the federation as a progressive Arab world, one which the Saudis are trying to make themselves. In just over 5 decades since its founding, the country has transformed itself into the Arab world's second largest economy. At its core, the rivalry is no longer simply about foreign policy disagreements. It is increasingly a contest between the two competing visions of regional leadership. Saudi Arabia's belief in hierarchical Arab order with Riyadh on the top and UAE's determination to project itself as an autonomous, modern and globally connected power in its own right. So to conclude, in many ways, what we are witnessing today is not just a Gulf rivalry, but the emergence of a new regional power struggle shaping the future of West Asia. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are no longer operating as a unified Gulf bloc. Both now envision themselves as a primary political, economic and strategic center of the Arab world, and that competition is increasingly spilling into conflicts across Middle East and Africa. But what makes the rivalry even more significant is the growing involvement of the two South Asian powers, India and Pakistan, standing quietly behind opposite Gulf camps. Pakistan remains deeply tied to Saudi Arabia through decades of military and financial dependence. India, meanwhile, is rapidly expanding its footprint along the UAE through trade, defense cooperation, energy partnerships, and strategic alignment with the emerging UAE-Israel axis. And perhaps this moment carries a deeper historical irony. In one of my earlier episodes on World Report, I had discussed how after the British withdrew from the Gulf region, there were serious conversations and strategic possibilities under which parts of Gulf would eventually have fallen under the influence or even the political umbrella of the newly independent India or Pakistan. That never happened. The Gulf states evolved into a powerful sovereign actors of their own. But history has a peculiar way of circling back in different forms. Today, India and Pakistan are not ruling the Gulf, but both countries once again hold significant influence in the region's evolving balance of power. Their alliances, economic leverage, military ties, and strategic positioning are becoming increasingly important in the shaping how this new Middle Eastern order unfolds. And as the rivalry between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi deepens, the Gulf may no longer remain merely an Arab geopolitical arena. It is gradually becoming a larger chessboard where regional ambitions, global power struggles, and the historic India-Pakistan competition are intersecting once again. This was Jash Hirani for World Report. Till I see you again, that's next Saturday at 8 p.m. Thanks for watching.